By the time you'd gotten your first screenwriting credit, how many scripts had you written?
Going to community college too was like, that's not leaving home. I'm still going home, and then, so I really wanted to get out, and then knowing I wanted to eventually work in Hollywood, it's like, am I ever gonna get out of this little bubble? We always hear sometimes it takes 10 years to be an overnight success, or 10 years to get the first credit. Your job's done when the movie or the TV show ends. And that's the gamble that you take. I've heard like superiors say about other people, this person isn't hungry enough. I wanted to crawl inside that movie. I watched it at a time when I was working overnight shift at a hotel. This is the hero's journey. This is their ordinary world. One of them leaves, or maybe a couple of them leaves. They go do the thing. They don't think they're gonna do it. They learn what they can do. They become greater than they were at the beginning, and then they take that elixir back. Write the bad version first. You have to write badly. I think early on there's this like thing that we get that professionals write perfectly. You're not gonna believe this. It's like we're around a campfire or whatever, and this crazy thing happened. And then suddenly people are like, and there was a rumor that this like grandmaster was gonna be practicing at night. And so they wanted to get a glimpse of what this guy did. And so the headmaster of my studio and a couple other like fellow like up and comers, because they weren't really established yet, went to go watch him in secret. And to see what is he, you know, flying kicks, like all this stuff, what is he gonna do? We want your take, and now we want to develop it with you. And so then you go from your pitching to now you're developing the show, and that means Bible, pilot, you're getting ready to hopefully get the green light and make it. But you need to get it down on paper, get it out of your head, because the longer something stays in your head, the less it's on the page, and that's really where the job is. It's not that writer's block is that you don't have any ideas, it's that you have too many and you don't know which one to write. I think the script is the hardest part, and every script is hard. Even, doesn't matter how long I've been doing this now, maybe 9 years or so, every script for TV is hard. There's a fear of getting pigeonholed, and that's another thing I say is like, just don't worry about getting pigeonholed, worry about getting paid. Booking your next writing job is when you sign a contract, not when you're promised anything. We've all done it or read scripts where like the beginning is perfect, and then the ending is like, it wraps up so quickly. I think that the rules that you choose to follow and the rules that you choose to break are what makes you you. There might be a time where we call on you to write a script, so always be writing.
Braden, I believe it took you 10 years to get your first screenwriting credit. I'm wondering if we can go back to the beginning.
Sure, yeah, I was close to graduating high school, and so during high school, like growing up, all I wanted to be was an artist, and so I was drawing obsessively. And high school, I had this insight that I was a mediocre artist at best. And so, but through that was really a love of storytelling and filmmaking, and so I was really drawing, but trying to draw stories. And so it wasn't until I got out of high school and found my way through community college, College of the Canyons, and stumbled into a film production 101 class that cemented it for me. It was all about screenwriting and filmmaking, and I did not have the grades to go to a typical kind of university, but that community college experience helped me find what I wanted to do, which was tell stories through writing instead of drawing.
And you know, sometimes I feel like community colleges get a bad rap, especially in areas where there are these like prestigious schools. But having gone to a community college myself, I loved it, and I felt like you get more individual attention.
I think so. I think you have time to find yourself, find what you like, however you want to describe it. But because it's way less expensive than a typical university, so you have time to wander a bit. And so I stumbled into classes taught by filmmaker Mike Ott and screenwriter Ron Mita, and these were professors that I still am in contact with. I'm still count as mentors, and that all happened at a community college. So not a typical college that you'd expect, but you're given time to find it.
And it's come full circle because you've been able to interview them on your Story Series podcast.
Yes, that was surreal and really humbling and just a wonderful opportunity to bring the mentors in and say, hey, I'm a little further along than I was in community college. Let's talk about their experience, and yeah, it was quite special.
What kind of screenplays were you writing your first 5 years as a quote-unquote amateur screenwriter?
Ooh, almost one of every genre. So my first feature spec screenplay was a horror film. It was like set in a snowy Los Angeles about this. It was almost like the Anthony Hopkins movie Slipstream about this aging screenwriter who starts to go crazy. Came out at around like a year or two after I had written the spec, and it's not connected in any way, but it had a similar kind of vibe. And so I always remember that time period. That romantic comedy, historical boxing epic. Raunchy comedy. It was very much trying to find what I like to write, and so it was just try one of each kind of genre.
But these were not in the animation these weren't set in an animation world?
No, not at all. It was, in college you're taught whatever's hot at the time, and it was all about, it was films. Nowadays it's probably TV. And because that's kind of where the golden age is happening in television. But back then it was just studying filmmaking and then just kind of writing what I liked and what I saw.
Right. And Blockbuster was still around then?
Blockbuster was still around, yeah. You could go out and rent a movie and watch it, and Netflix was still a DVD company, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What changed about your writing or your writing process that made you go from aspiring screenwriter to professional screenwriter?
Part of that was what I was exposed to. So jumping ahead a little bit to, you alluded to that 10-year mark of when I finally became a quote-unquote professional screenwriter. My first credit was on an animated show called Stretch Armstrong. It was a 22-minute animated series, 6 to 11 kind of demographic. And what changed was I was exposed to it. So I had in my kind of arsenal, my portfolio, all these feature specs, but I ended up getting a temp job at Hasbro Studios. And I was just everybody's assistant, kind of going all around the company all day and delivering mail and whatever needed to be done. And then the production floor, the second floor, let me know that there was this show that got greenlit called Stretch Armstrong. It was Netflix and Hasbro were making it together, and they knew I wanted to write, the people at the company, and they said, this is your shot, go interview. And I thought, oh, okay, animation. Like, I loved animation growing up. It was really formidable for me as a kid, but I never went back to it professionally because I couldn't draw, so that was kind of off the table. And so I didn't kind of connect, and in college you're not really taught you're not really introduced to writing for animation. It's not really a thing. And so I interviewed and read the pilot script of this show that they were making, and it was so good that I thought, if this is animation, this different kind of writing, I'm in. I want to get close to it. I want to get in it. And so what changed was just being exposed to it and loving it.
Well, you loved comics as a kid, is that right?
Yeah, comics. Rocko's Modern Life was a big influence on me as like a '90s Nickelodeon kid, and so that was big. And specifically in Rocko's Modern Life, they would show the making of the show during the commercial breaks. So you got to see the creator Joe Murray in his studio, surrounded by drawings, and that's where I was like, I want to draw, I want to do that. But it was really storyteller, but the drawing was how it came out for many years, and so that was the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the Charles Schultz documentary about the Peanuts.
Mm-mm.
Okay, it's excellent. And so he kind of just said when he's at that drawing table, like he feels so powerful because he can orchestrate this world and that he doesn't feel anywhere else. So yeah.
Yeah. There's a magic to it. It transports you, absolutely.
When did you realize that animation could be your path into the business?
That first show, Stretch Armstrong. First, I was lucky enough that a large part of the production was still being done at the studio, so I got to see storyboard artists take the scripts that were being written over here and storyboard them over here. I started as a script coordinator, and so I got to go to records and see the actors recording the lines that were boarded here, written here, and so I got to see this. I like to say Stretch Armstrong was my animation school, and so I got to see the pipeline, and I just loved it. And because I was working as an entry-level on the show script coordinator, I was at least getting paid. And so then halfway through that first season, the head writers were gracious enough to say, hey, we're gonna give you a script. This is your shot. And that was my first professional credited script. And I was so ready for it because I knew the show really well, and I loved the process, and it was hard, but it was engaging, and so I thought, how can I do more of this? And so you never know if it's your real path in the industry, but you hope it is, and so that was the hope. I could see it now through animation.
So you grew up not too far from Hollywood, quote unquote, Burbank, these studios. But did you know anyone in the business? Was your family in the business?
No, no. I hesitated for a second because I later found out that one of my mom's brothers, he's an uncle, was an uncle of mine, and he wanted to be a screenwriter. And he wrote some scripts, and he went to CSUN, and he wrote query letters and would send his query letters out to agents, managers, production companies to get his stuff read. And he also had personal struggles, and he's not here anymore. And so I only knew him a little bit as a kid, just first couple years of my life, so I don't really have any memories of him. But it wasn't until I told my parents, hey, I want to study screenwriting, that my mom kind of slowly opened up and said, you know, your Uncle John was a writer. And so she gave me a script that he wrote on like this kind of blue folder with brads in it, which we don't really use anymore. It's all PDFs now. And so it's a physical script set in the 80s, which was modern when he wrote it, about like, it's kind of a 80s modern detective story, kind of a throwback to the Raymond Chandler kind of stuff set in Northridge, California. And there's some of his query letters in there still. And I got to see his writing style, which was like kind of dark comedy. And there's a real connection that I see in what I see that he's written in me, which was really interesting. So that was where he took that, and other circumstances in his life prevented him from kind of going all the way. But so did I have anyone? No, but there was a connection to someone in my family who did want to go down that path. And so, yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And you had talked about it on another podcast, that, you know, because we always hear, well, you have to have somebody, you know, hey, maybe make a couple calls for Brandon and we'll get him in there. But it sounds like you started, you know, delivering mail, getting coffee, things like that.
Yeah, exactly. It was, I studied overseas for almost 2 years, and when I came back, I was applying all over. I was like, I'm ready to get into an entry-level, kind of anywhere, production company, just to get my foot in the door. And I wasn't getting any bites for like 6 months. And then in Santa Clarita, which is where I was living, I found a temp agency. And I called them up and I said, here's what I'm looking for. And they said, well, we don't really have entertainment companies, but sometimes. And I said, well, that's better than like 6 months of nothing. So like sometimes, I'll take sometimes. So I signed up with them, you know, take a computer test, all that stuff. And then the next day they said, we have a company called Hasbro. And I said, oh, I've heard of that. They make movies and they had toys. And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah. So they set me up with an interview. I think it was on a Tuesday. I interviewed at Hasbro. As soon as I walked into their studio in Burbank, I was like, I had a good feeling. I was like, I think I'm gonna get that. I like this. And on my way home, I was calling the temp agency to let them know how the interview went. I couldn't get through. Then they called me back and they said, hey, yeah, that was Hasbro on the other line. They want you to start tomorrow.
Wow. That's
And
awesome.
I thought, oh, okay, this is it. So this is how I can grow. And so that was really like the kind of the first big break was there.
Okay, so that kind of dispels the myth that it has to be people that you know. So,
If it's not people you know, then it's a numbers game, and you just gotta. If this doesn't work, try this. If this doesn't work, try this. It's a series of that kind of thinking. Yeah. So if submitting your resume doesn't work, how about a temp agency? How can I increase my chances? It's like whatever you can do.
when you found your uncle's query letters, did it kind of validate, even maybe looking back on it even now, because you've had more time since you probably saw those, did it validate your journey? Did you realize like how difficult this is, but how grateful you are for being part of it?
Yeah, made me wish I knew him better and I could talk writing with him, and glad that I no longer drink, because that was something that he went through was addiction, and so it was like that. This is no joke. Like if you don't, take care of other things in your life, that's gonna become a problem, and so it's also a look at what can happen if you don't address certain things. But mostly, I just wish I could talk writing with him. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe in some ways he's writing through you. You never know.
Yeah. I do want to now go back to that script and reread it now as someone who's now with years of kind of working professionally behind me, like let me go back to his script and give it another look and just see what I feel. And yeah, but I have it. It's in my kind of like cabinet at home. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Mental health in this industry is not always talked about. It seems like now people are definitely talking about it more and more. But yeah, it's definitely not an easy thing to have a stable life doing this.
Yeah, it's it's a very unstable kind of life, as we talked about. You have to be good at waiting, and waiting can lead to all sorts of things. And it's like you have to wait in a healthy way, right? Like there's ways to take your mind off it. There's ways to cope and kind of self-medicate, quote unquote, like in all kinds of ways that are healthy and not. So you have to be aware of that because this is a long game. Like it is a long game, and so that any sort of addiction like that is not play well in a long game. And so it's like just like keep that in mind too, because it really it's a long game. Like that's just got to look at it that way.
And also, too, people won't always tell you why certain things happen, why you weren't chosen, why you were being let go, whatever it is, and allowing that to, no one can really be at peace with that, but finding a way to cope with that.
Yeah, that's a great point because not all no's are equal, and you don't always have the backstory or the context of why they said no. But it's just thank you, we really enjoyed it. Next, that's kind of, and you don't know, and so you can't put your whole identity on it because then you're outsourcing your validation to other people, and so which is going to look like this up and down, and so you have to be careful. Yeah, it's not a sustainable way to do it.
What made you ready for the opportunity to write on Stretch Armstrong?
Yeah, what made me ready? So I was hired on the show as essentially a script coordinator, script PA, which means you're close to the writers and you're also close to the whole process in general. So first, you're just learning the show. You're learning the language of the show. Every single script that would go out to the network for notes would kind of cross my desk, and it's part of your job to proofread it, get it ready, all that stuff, but you're just devouring everything. So there's that. I would also, all the head writers on the show would freelance, offer scripts to other freelancers, and so I would see the scripts that would come in from the freelancers, and then how the head writers would tweak it and change it and do their pass on it, which is typical, but I would see how they would fix things and what they would do and try to get into their style a little bit. And so it was just a full-on education of like the story of the show, the language of the scripts, how it felt, and just being a sponge. And so wisely, the head writers were like, they gave me a script. I think there was like a 26 season order, and I was like number 22. And so that was like enough for this newbie writer to learn the show and then be ready when that happened.
And did anybody kind of take you aside and be like, you know what, just be quiet, kid, and watch, or whatever? Or no.
That's a great question. To their credit, first day on the job, they took me to lunch. This is Kevin Burke and Doc Wyatt. And they said, there might be a time where we call on you to write a script. So always be writing. And in that moment, I felt seen, because of course everyone wants their opportunity like right now to write a script. So that relieved me of like, do they know I want to write? Do they know? That's what everyone asked themselves as they're on their way up. Like, do these people know what I want? And so that I didn't have to think about that. I could focus on the craft and just doing a good job on the show and not messing that up. And so that was a big deal. And so they put that out there, and it was like, wow, okay, great. That's all I need to know. And then it's just head down and work hard.
Interesting. So that seed was already kind of planted, but you didn't maybe want to be, beating your chest too much. You just kind of want to be eyes and keeping the ears open. Interesting.
Yes. And so that was a big deal. And so then it was just like, okay, this is mine to lose. They know why. And in the interview, they asked, what do you ultimately want to do? And so that's when you make it clear, I'd love to write, and I want to be a script. Here's my background. Here's what I studied. So they knew what I wanted. But then once it's like came time to do the job, it's like, there might be one that can go to you. So just always be writing. And it was like, okay, yeah.
Interesting. Almost as if your time before you got the writing gig was almost the real interview, because maybe they want to see how do you handle being told no, or how do you work with others?
Yeah, thankfully, because I I had history at the studio as a temp. So they knew of me because I was, I had a position before that, which was just, delivering mail, like being everybody's assistant. So there was at least enough of a reputation to go, okay, he's somewhat, he knows, he could probably do this job. We can trust him. And so there was enough of that, I think, I had going for me at that time, to where they could say, okay, let's take a chance. Yeah.
By the time you'd gotten your first screenwriting credit, how many scripts had you written?
Ooh, at least 10 feature-length specs, a handful of shorts, notebooks full of ideas and scribbled, yeah, but probably at least 10 feature specs that, starting from like the very first awful one to slightly less bad each one, but yeah, probably something around that. But never a TV script, kind of ironically, like which was my first job, was writing on a TV show essentially, and I hadn't written a TV script before, and so that was also a chance that they took. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Was it a challenge to get the second screenwriting job?
Oh yeah, yeah. So they say, like, we always hear it, sometimes it takes 10 years to be an overnight success, or 10 years to get the first credit, and then it was about 2 years before script number 2 came. And so, not as bad as 10 years, but still, yeah, that was on a totally different show, too. That was on the next show that came after Stretch Armstrong. Yeah.
So, and you talked about this on another podcast, and it was so great that people think that once you get cast or once you're like working for a studio or whatever, that's your job forever, and it's actually, no, it's going to end if the show ends.
Correct. Yeah, it's like not unlike acting. Like, your job's done when the movie or the TV show ends. And that's the gamble that you take, not being an executive or someone in development, which those are great jobs, but those are the jobs typically that you're there longer term for working for the studio. If you're a writer, which is great if you could do it, but that job's scary. I mean, every 2 years you need a new job, basically.
So
Yeah.
the first one ended, and it seemed like this was just like from the heavens. You got this, through Hasbro. But then how much time went by? You said about 2 years.
About 2 years.
Okay.
So Stretch Armstrong was ending, and one of the EPs on the show, his name is Vic Cook, was going to Disney. And he said, it doesn't look like Stretch Armstrong is going to get another season, so you're going to need a job soon. I'm going to this show. It's called T.O.T.S for Disney Junior, and it's a preschool show, but I want to recommend you for script coordinator, and which is essentially the script PA, the job I was already doing, which was great. But I remember thinking, preschool? I was like, I don't want to write baby stuff. Like 6 to 11, Stretch Armstrong was like your classic Saturday morning cartoon kind of vibe that I grew up with. This is like aged younger. And so I thought, preschool? But I read the pilot script, which to me read like a Pixar movie. It was so sophisticated but funny and simple. It captured me. And I thought, okay, if this is preschool, I'm in. So of course, Disney, of course, everybody, it's an amazing place to work, but specifically the preschool was something that I didn't know about until I was exposed to it. It was another example of like, sometimes you don't know what you will like until you're just exposed to it. And so you can't plan 10 steps ahead sometimes. You don't know everything. And so I got a script coordinator job on that show, which was incredible, and now I was closer to the writers in the writer's room. I was taking notes, I was all that stuff, and still reading every script. And then the head writer on the show, once again, was like, if you have any ideas, just throw them out. Like, he gave me permission to speak in the room, because we're all sometimes like, oh, you don't want to talk or take over, or what's my place as an assistant? And again, that door was just kind of like left a little open, and it was like, you could walk through it if you want. And so, long story short is I pitched ideas, just kind of nuggets of ideas, and then one of them became my first script on that show, which was, professional credit number 2. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So 2 years. So did you have a lot of downtime in between those two?
No, the downtime was I became post coordinator on Stretch Armstrong as that show was winding down. So I went from, working with the scripts to then when the scripts were done, handling post-production, like post-production assistant basically. So when that was ending, that next show, T.O.T.S, was beginning. So because of that crossover, I was able to leave one on a Friday and start the next on a Monday.
Wow,
So
okay.
there was no professional writing in that time, but it was just, you're there as just working on the show, seeing it to its conclusion.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, very little, you had a weekend
Essentially,
off.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. What did you learn about screenwriting jobs after you got that second script job?
Learn about screenwriting jobs. Well, the fundamentals are true, which is first thing that came to mind, make sure you're on time. I mean, these obvious things that you don't always think about is true. Make sure it's on time. Part of your job as a screenwriter, at least in television, when you work for a head writer, is you want to make sure you nail the language of the show as much as possible, because the head writer is always going to do some work on your draft, and to the extent of it depends on their personality and how close you are. Some of them have a heavy hand, depending on just that's who they are and that's what they like. Or if it's like someone they just missed or didn't do a great job, then the head writer has to lift it up, and so they're kind of like quality control. And so part of your job is just making their life as easy as possible, because they have a ton of material going across their desk. So if they have to spend a ton of time fixing yours, you're not going to get another shot. So just learning the language of the show is key. Being on time, because it's TV, so every week is the same schedule. It's just a different episode. And there's always multiple balls in the air. So those kinds of key things. And also you can't predict where the next job is going to come from. Like, you're lucky if you can line something up, but there's a lot of chance in just trying to build a career. And so that was something too. And also, and I touched on this earlier, but just, you don't know what you like sometimes until you're exposed to it. So just keeping an open mind, because you're not supposed to know everything about yourself or your interests right at the beginning and have this grand plan. You have to have a loose but kind of flexible grip on just where or how you'll grow.
And from having grown up in the greater Los Angeles area, Santa Clarita is what, maybe on a bad day, an hour and a half from Burbank or something.
That's a really bad day. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Well, there are those days, but
That's true.
you're going to be in just stop and go traffic. But
Yeah.
but maybe 20 minutes if you're lucky. What have you seen from the people that sort of stick it out here that are not from the greater LA area? Maybe they're not even from California. Based on those who pack it up and go home.
Ooh.
Is there a flexibility? Is it just luck?
Part of it is always luck and timing, and there's things outside of your control. I like to think that there are things you could do to increase your luck, because that's really kind of what it is. But the difference between someone who packs it up and goes home versus someone who sticks it out, I think early on, there's just this relentless workaholic-ism that you need to just inhabit. And show that I've heard superiors say about other people, this person isn't hungry enough. And sometimes you hear that. And so, and you have to, I think, being in an environment where it's happening and you can learn from other people and take cues from other people on how they're conducting themselves gives you, okay, I got to make sure this person knows what I'm interested in, or I got to make sure I'm here on time, or like all those basic things. But there's no other way to do it other than just having this kind of maximum all-in mindset for a while, just to establish yourself. I don't know any other way to do it, and then hope that there's some luck sprinkled in there. Yeah, that's a tough one, because it's hard to kind of nail down, but that's what comes to mind.
Yeah, I like that. That's great.
Yeah.
Hungry enough, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good. How small is the world of LA screenwriters?
Very small. Very small. Animation is even smaller. Okay. And so no matter what, if you're on 2 shows, then you're almost you're 1 or 2 degrees away from everyone. That's just it. So it is a very small industry. And animation has a reputation of being very, just on a whole, filled with generous people, and there's a niceness that it has in its reputation, as opposed to live action, for example. Most of the people in animation want to be there for animation, not because they're going to get rich or famous, because that's not it's not Writers Guild money. And so it's a different group of people, but yeah, it's small.
Yeah, I kind of noticed at horror conventions, people are actually really nice.
Right.
You would think the opposite, but no, they're actually really cool, and it's not posturing, and there's no industry vibe.
Yeah, if you're there for the reason that everyone else is there, then there is a niceness to, like, you found your place where you're comfortable or where you feel like yourself. And I think maybe that's probably underneath that.
Yeah. You also talked about there came a point in your life where you had to say no to certain things. So in the beginning you were hungry and you were saying yes, but then at some point you dialed it back and started saying no, and I was curious about that.
Yes, that's a powerful one. So of course when you're starting out, you say yes to everything, often to our detriment, because you're just happy to be offered anything, and you don't want to say no because you never know, and so you have to be open-minded. But there's a time where, when I was, as an example, living overseas, I was on a scholarship, and I was like, okay, I'm going to say yes and just kind of find my way in this film school. I was studying at the Beijing Film Academy in China, and through this random scholarship through CSUN, and I was out there saying yes to everything. Anyone asked me to do anything on a film set or whatever, student film, you're just saying yes because partly you're meeting people, you're getting out of your comfort zone, but at a certain point, you should start to say no, and that just helps you focus up a little bit. And so it was a good reminder of, like, why did I come out here in the first place? To ultimately be a better writer. And so I can't lose sight of that. So at some point, saying yes to everything is going to go against that. And so there's a period where you need to kind of focus up a little bit, is another way to look at it. And so that saying no is helpful. And then later in your life, there might be other reasons why you say no to things professionally, if you're lucky, and those could be for different reasons. But yeah, saying no is tough, but sometimes necessary.
Being in entertainment, is it synonymous with always being in sort of a stage of waiting?
Yes, yes. I think, yeah, Tom Petty is saying that the waiting is the hardest part.
Yeah.
You know, you have to get good at waiting. So yeah, you have to be, I try to play these mind games of, like, can you be proactive while you wait? Which kind of seems to go against what waiting is, but it's like, okay, you're waiting on this thing, but what could you do while you wait so you take your mind off it? And that's like, usually, maybe you're trying to send your script out, so obviously you don't send it to like one person, right? You send it to a dozen people or whatever, and so another way to say it is you have multiple balls in the air, and that sometimes offsets the rejection. Because if the thing you're waiting on, that door closes, well, okay, good thing I started this dialogue over here with this person and with this person. And so there's a little bit of like, how could you stay active while you wait? But you have to get good at it, because that's not something you can control, is when you hear back from someone. Because it's always like, you're gonna hear back soon, but you don't know what that is. And so you have to find ways to take your mind off it, and also just, stay active.
Now I'm wondering, how soon do you sort of cast these lines? Like, the show's going to end in maybe 6 weeks or something. How far ahead are you putting out feelers for something new?
That's a great question. It's throughout the life of the show, and so it picks up with urgency as the show is coming to an end. 6 weeks is my first thought was, that's kind of tight. Oh,
is it? Okay,
maybe it's 3 months. Three
Okay.
months is a good, like, hey, I'm going to be wrapping up in this. I'd love to, you're just letting people know that you're going to be available soon. But also, like, during the life of a show, you have busy weeks, not so busy weeks, and so sometimes it's helpful to set up those lunches or things like that, where you're just planting seeds and just seeing what's going on, reminding people you exist, because it's easy to just kind of go in this hole of the job that you're on, and then look up too late and you're like, oh, I'm going to be out of a job soon. So 3 months is like a good average, and again, it's back to that, like, a little bit of luck and a lot of, like, numbers of letting people know that you'll be available.
And it sounds like, too, you don't want it to be where your job is now becoming someone else's problem. So you want to kind of do it in a way, I'm just assuming, forgive me, that where it's not like, hey man, do you have anything? And you're trying to kind of plan it out on an even keel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, the first priority is always the show that you're on, or the job, but typically the show will start to taper down. So you don't have scripts anymore, you don't have this, so you'll get some of your time back, and hopefully you're still have the job, but it'll just be, you'll have less responsibilities. So those are the times when you can fill that time with like, hey, I'm putting the word out to people, or what else is coming up, or talking to the studio, where are the executive producers going to go after this, or where's the head writers going, and just stuff like that. And those are like normal conversations that people have, because that's just the life. Everybody knows this is going to end, and then what is the next thing? Everybody's looking. Some people have that set up already, so you just want to be part of that dialogue too.
Okay, so you're trying to do it to where it's not a state of an emergency, where it's like now, like, hey, it's someone else's problem, basically.
No, it shouldn't be a state of emergency, because that is the life.
Okay, great.
And so if you're in that constant state of emergency, that will wear on you mentally. You can't. You have to live with the uncertainty. You have to live with that pressure of unknown of what's going to come after. That's just part of the bargain. It reminded me of like Alex Honnold, the famous climber, right? Where someone asked him if he is like afraid while he's climbing, and he said, if you're afraid, you're doing it wrong. And so, because if as much as he climbs and as much as he loves it, if he was afraid, he'd be in this like tight and you
Right.
can't live like that very long in that kind of industry. And so whether you're climbing or writing, there has to be a level of like just acceptance that comes with, I don't know what's going to happen after this, but I didn't know that the last job and the job before that. And so you just have to go with it. Doesn't mean you don't panic sometimes, but just you have to bring it back to that acceptance.
Right, and I think that's the beauty of creative people, is that sometimes I think we like a little bit of unknown because it's freeing. That's why we don't have the same thing every day, because you
Yeah.
feel like you're in this box.
Yes.
So.
Yes, it is nice sometimes to have that new job every couple of years, or you're in that new environment, and there is excitement to it for sure. And so I think that's part of what attracts people to it.
Yeah, I think that's the curse of wanting to be a creative person, unfortunately, because for those of us who have had day jobs, it is nice to know, okay, I have a steady paycheck coming in and I don't have to sweat bills and things like that. But there is something that eventually I think it starts to gnaw at you. At least I can only speak for myself. So.
Yes, yeah, I definitely have been there. And then sometimes you go the other way, where you're like, wonder like, what would it feel like to like go back to Starbucks right now?
Yeah, no, totally. I've been there too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well. Can we talk about your pitch for CoComelon Lane? First off, how did you get the opportunity to pitch to begin with?
Yeah, so back to the show T.O.T.S. I was on so that same head writer that opened that door earlier, where he said, hey, if you ever have any ideas, speak up. So he ended up leaving later on, second season, I think, for another show. And I stayed on the show. Eventually, I was promoted to staff writer, so I was staff writing on T.O.T.S. And his name is T.O.T.S. He came to me like third season of T.O.T.S., so he was somewhere else. He said, hey, I got this email from this company, and they are looking for takes on CoComelon, the property, and looking for aged up takes. And do you want to do this with me? And I thought, oh yeah, this will be like great practice, like sure. And so we put this pitch together. We kind of took in like what the property, what CoComelon was, and I was like, okay, this is for very young kids, like kind of for babies and nursery rhymes, but they're looking to age it up. And so we essentially said, what if we did like a Rugrats kind of take on these characters, these kids? And so that's how that came about, really. That's how it started.
Would you have been able to get the pitch meeting if you hadn't been a screenwriter starting out?
No. So that's an example of something that you can't predict, but that comes back around. So it was the impression I made on him when we were working together. And then he ended up leaving, so we kind of go separate ways. Something falls on his desk, and he's like, hey, do you want to team up and do this together? And so that was, a great circumstance of like opportunity and timing coming together. Yeah.
And being ready, and you talked about in the beginning they took you to lunch, your first job, and kind of said,
right,
you may get this opportunity. And
yes. So yeah, being ready like that, and just always being writing. I mean, that's why you're doing it in the first place. So you can do it for yourself. It's not like every piece of material you have to go out and try to sell, but it's just doing it. The act of doing is important. And so, yeah, when he came back around and asked me, do we want to team up? I literally was like, oh, I hadn't done this before. Like putting a pitch together, like this is great practice. Yeah. And so we got this prompt of kind of what they were looking for, this like one pager of like, here's the property and here's where we want to take it. And we put a very simple pitch and a very simple story engine around that prompt, and then took it to them as like an oral pitch.
How long was the pitch that you created?
Ooh, this was an oral pitch, so it was 10 minutes, probably 10 minutes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how long did it take you to create that pitch?
Probably 2-ish weeks, a couple weeks of passing something back and forth and having some meetings of him and I and just kind of shaping it. Yeah.
Where did the pitch take place?
The pitch was all on Zoom. This was during the pandemic. And so I was home at the time working on another show, staff writing during the day, and this was something that we could do. It was all from home, yeah.
Was that, do you think that was in your favor? Did you actually feel more comfortable being in your own environment doing this pitch rather than if they called you in?
A bit, because it was my first kind of time, and also you could simply, a lot of people do this, have your notes in front of the Zoom. So instead of seeing faces, because sometimes, you know, you're always looking for that feedback when you're pitching of like, okay, this person looked at their watch, or this person looked at the, you know, are they engaged? Am I losing them? And so you could literally just slide your notes over their faces when it's your turn to talk, and then just pretend like you're pitching in front of the mirror, you know, whatever, to just take that like out of the equation and just like focus on the words and just telling the story. Yeah, and not like trying to psychoanalyze all their eye movements, you know, which can drive you nuts.
Sure, you weren't like Jan Brady in the Brady Bunch episode, right? Yeah. Where she froze, yeah.
Yeah. That's not what.
Good.
Yeah.
So 2 weeks to come up with essentially a 10-minute pitch?
Yeah.
What went into that 2-week time? What are you doing with that?
You always bring too much. You, like any first draft, you always have more than you need. And so it's really like putting everything, all your ideas out there on the page, and then just seeing what can we repeat. Because this is TV, every episode is gonna feel, you know, you're trying to find the story engine. That's the key in every TV pitch, like especially in kids television, is like, what's the engine? And so how can we repeat this every episode while rotating what we need to rotate out, like for characters or for lessons or for whatever, but also have a familiarity to it. Because this is for kids, so it's gotta have those repeatable elements. And so you're really finding that in the pitch is like, what do we want to repeat? What do we want to feel new? And is this going to satisfy over 72 episodes? Because that was, I think, at the time, what we were told they were looking for. And it was 7 minutes, too. So we knew it was 7 minutes long. So it's like, okay, so that's what we have to work with. So Stretch Armstrong was 22, T.O.T.S was 11, so it's like everything's getting like shorter now. And it's like, okay, but we still want a beginning, middle, and end. You still have to have story structure in 7 minutes. So like, what does that look like? So it was a lot of those kinds of conversations. And also making sure simplicity is like the most important thing. Especially like in any pitch, just to understand it, because again, we always want to bring too much, but it's like, is there strength in just the simple story engine? And so that takes time. It's like the simple thing and shaving stuff down and getting rid of stuff you don't need, that's like where the time goes.
Can we talk about this story engine that you keep talking about? What is the story engine for CoComelon Lane?
Yeah, so the show itself is about kids' milestones. So first time going to the doctor, first time going to the dentist, losing your toy, or all these things that kids go through. And so it's like, and we had this cast of like 6 kids, but one of them was like the main one. His name was JJ. And so it was like, okay, how do we feature him as like, and be true to him being like, he's like the Mickey Mouse of that company. Like he's the mascot. So we need to feature him prominently, but all these other kids, how do we give them time as well? And feature a milestone in every episode, and with that milestone, there's going to be an emotion. So a kid is afraid to go to the doctors. They're going to say, you feel afraid, or you feel this, and they validate it, the adult. You know, the mom, dad, older sibling says it's okay to feel that way. Here's what you can do about it. And then you get into the song, because CoComelon is all music-based. And so they still wanted music, but they also wanted kids talking and dialogue. And that hadn't been done before. The original CoComelon, it's like 2-3 minute nursery rhymes of singing, and you see the characters, and they're young, obviously, because it's 4 babies, but they're not actually talking. So this is the first time where we're giving kids, these kids that everybody kind of saw, aging them up, giving them voices, personalities, and then the why, which is, okay, they're doing some big thing they've never done before, and they encounter something they didn't expect, they get help, and then they go back and share it with their friends. Hey, I did that thing, and I was scared at first, but I did this about it or did that. And then putting it together, it was like, this is the hero's journey. This is their ordinary world. One of them leaves, or maybe a couple of them leaves. They go do the thing. They don't think they're going to do it. They learn what they can do. They become greater than they were at the beginning, and then they take that elixir back. It's really funny, but that is the hero's journey. And so even in 7 minutes, CoComelon Lane, it's like, yeah, that is strong. And so as a story engine, as a pitch, then you know how simple you can get. Because here's the structure of it. The locations can change, but like we would typically open on the playground. So it's like, okay, a couple of the kids playing. They're just doing what kids do. And then they're like, but one of them has something they're gonna do. And so then they tell the other kids about it. And that kid who's like the mascot I told you, JJ, he broke the fourth wall. So he would be the one greeting. So we actually said it was like, Rugrats means like Ferris Bueller for CoComelon. And so he would draw the audience in. So he was our relationship to the kids at home. And so he was the one, you know, as like the main kid that everybody associates with CoComelon, he was the only one that could talk to the audience. So like, hey, come on in, we're gonna do this thing together. And so that was how we answered that kind of fun problem of like, how do we make him stand out, but give the other kids time to shine. And it was like, that's how you give him one little thing that's special. And then, and then they leave the playground, they go do the thing with the mom or dad or whoever, and maybe one friend comes along or doesn't, and then they go back there at the end, wherever we started. Maybe it was a friend's house or the playground, and they go, hey, I just did the thing, and here's what I did about it. Wow, I can't wait to do that. And so that was the thing you could repeat each time that made it fun and fresh and also familiar. Yeah.
And when you interviewed Ron Mita on your Story Series podcast, I think he talked about how he doesn't necessarily outline, he does these short stories.
Yeah, so that was for pitching, which was great. The way he pitches is, and this is a thing too, like so often pitch decks or whatever can read like technical documents, which they should not. And they definitely shouldn't be pitched like a technical document, but we've all fallen victim to it because pitching is its own skill set. But he writes short stories. So he takes whatever the concept is for a movie or whatever, and he'll write the short story version for himself. And that's the version he reads. And part of the reason for that is he wants the vibe of like, you're not gonna believe this. It's like we're around a campfire or whatever, and this crazy thing happened. And then suddenly people are like leaning, you wanna listen to it as opposed to like, this is about this and it's for this. And like there's a way to hook people in, just like you wanna hook someone on the page. A pitch is that same thing. And so he writes it as a short story, which I think is a great exercise too, because you are also seeing what works and what is popping for your own idea. And so I think the more you learn about what you're trying to tell or the world you're trying to create, the better. And so that was a really interesting insight.
Right, yeah, I want to finish that episode because he seemed like a straight shooter with so much.
Oh,
he just
yeah.
kind of like told it like it is. And we had another person that we interviewed who also talked about his 24 plot points
Yes.
that he does.
Was that Eric Edson?
No, we've talked to him. He was wonderful. No, this was Adam Argo.
Oh,
So he
okay.
talked about the 24 plot points, and Ron Mita had recommended that.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about that specific meeting for the CoComelon Lane pitch?
The thing I remember, which is true for every pitch, is you never know how it goes. You never know. And so we pitched that, what I told you, and you always answer questions, because the executives are always going to ask questions, and then that's kind of it. And then you back to waiting, and part of what we were doing, we know other writers are trying out. It's like an audition for an actor. Writers audition too, and so you just never know. And so you always think, oh, I think it went well, but you don't know. And so it's back to waiting and then doing other things and then hoping they reach out. And so what ended up happening is they reached out again and said, hey, we really liked it. Could you come back and pitch this higher up person? Which is always a good sign. And so it's like, okay, yeah. And so did it again, did the pitch. Okay, we think it goes well. And back to waiting. And I think this was like around like a December. And so it was like you have the Christmas break and all that, and then you wait. And then sometime in January, I think that was when they said, hey, we want your take. And now we want to develop it with you. And so then you go from your pitching to now you're developing the show. And that means Bible, pilot, you're getting ready to hopefully get the green light and make it. But that was a couple pitches and then you get the, like, you're selected, yeah.
In line with that, we actually had a question come in that we want to run by you and wondering if you can respond to this comment. How do I even get a meeting? I have 2 pilots fully realized with decks, series Bibles and pilots. Can't get anyone to respond to inquiries for attachment to take it to a producer, or the managers of these big agencies won't take unsolicited work. It's really hilarious.
Yeah. It feels like a catch-22. No one wants to read you without a rep, but no rep wants to. There's that tug of war. I think so. You immediately have to try multiple ways. There's not just one way. I would say one way to do it is to target an agent or manager who is looking for someone who's new and up and coming. So who you're targeting, to then take the material to a larger company. If a company won't get back to you, then they'll hopefully likely get back to an agent or manager. So maybe you should target them first, and target someone who's looking for up and coming writers is one way to do it. There's a lot of events now that are helpful in meeting people, because you could just brush shoulders with someone who might know someone to help. Like there are those networking things where, like, those happy accidents, you could try to put yourself in an environment where people are getting together, that like-minded writers and people, and then maybe a writer could say, oh, you should talk to this person, or there's ways like that. But aside from just, I think it goes back to that numbers. It's just like, if someone's not willing to read it, like, I remember I would send out like 30 query letters and get 1 response. That's like, okay, then I have to send out 60 to get 2. And so part of it is just being politely persistent is the other way to do it. Because then eventually that's how you'll increase your luck, and then hopefully that timing will line up. But I don't know another way other than just things like that.
If you are interested in storytelling, you may also like our new book, Story Questions, the sponsor of today's video. It's a story tool that offers you over 1,500 story questions that you can use as story prompts. It's packed with over 40 categories, so whether you are in the brainstorming stages, developing characters, dialogue, or rewriting, it can help you at every stage of the writing process. Think about this statement. Most powerful stories are just great answers to strong questions. We've linked up to story questions in the information section below. Now back to the interview. Can you tell us the process for writing the first draft of an animated screenplay?
Ooh, yeah. So that changed from being like, as I've grown professionally, but now the way I do it, the way I think is way that works really well for me, is write the bad version first. You have to write badly. I think early on there's this like thing that we get that professionals write perfectly, and that professionals never write anything bad, or it can't be like this or that. And that's not true. I really think the definition of a professional is someone who stays in motion, meaning an amateur might freeze, professional stays in motion, and even if that motion is bad writing. And the reason I think that's important is because you need to get to the end. And you need to get to the middle of the end, but especially in screenwriting, and especially in TV where it's shorter than feature, it's real estate. It's like, so to see the skeleton of something is so crucial, because how often we've all done it or read scripts where like the beginning is perfect and then the ending is like, it wraps up so quickly. It's because all the time was spent earlier in the script writing it and making it perfect, and then the ending is like almost an afterthought. And I think by getting to just the bad version down, you can see where things fall, how much space you might need or time you might need to tell this part or this part, this part. And then you, again, like the key phrase for like being a professional is writing is rewriting. Like we hear that in class or film, like everything, and it's like, oh, whatever, you know, it's, you kind of discount it, but that is the job. And so if you just let yourself write badly first, you will rewrite it. But you need to get it down on paper, get it out of your head, because the longer something stays in your head, the less it's on the page, and that's really where the job is. And so I think time can be wasted like just keeping things in our head, and you swim in indecision, but you need to make decisions, even if they're the wrong ones, because the rewriting is now making those decisions better. And so the first draft of an animated script, any script really, but it's just do the bad version first, go back and rewrite it, and that's like the key thing.
I love that. So you said being a professional is motion, keep moving.
Yeah, like amateurs freeze, professionals stay in motion. It's like if you want to think of it that way, because I remember I used to like, especially starting out, and when I first like my first professional script or second one on the Disney show, it was like every word had to be perfect, every line, and then it would take so long. Because you get to the end, but it's like it's too long, and it's not the best way to write. It's just not, and I didn't like that process. I liked what I had eventually, but it's not a fun, and you have to be able to go as a TV writer, because it's you have this, and then you have this, and you have this, so you can't just like waste time wanting things to be perfect from your head to the page. It's like, no, just get it down and then make it as close to perfect. It never gets there, but as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That's makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I enjoy that.
I like to think like that's kind of what writer's block is. When people say writer's block, is that it's not that you can't or you don't know. It's not that writer's block is that you don't have any ideas. It's that you have too many and you don't know which one to write. And so you're spending too much time up here, and it's like get it on the page and start moving it around. And that is what I find gets me unstuck if I ever feel that way. Yeah.
And so when you were working these different writing jobs, were you writing on, let's say, a Saturday or Sunday, your own stuff, just to keep sort of like something in your back pocket? What else do you have?
Yes, or especially early on, writing for the show on a Saturday or Sunday, because I was still writing that long way of like everything has to be perfect and getting in my head too much about like, what does a professional script look like, and just, too much in your head. And so it bleeds over into the weekend because you still got to get it done. And so there would be some of that. And then, always trying to like write on other things, put your own pilot together or pitch it out there. Maybe you're lucky to have another freelance job or something. Yeah, something would come up. Mm-hmm.
Was writing at home something that was working for you, or would you go out somewhere and write?
Yeah, I work at home would be fine. There's a cigar shop that I go to.
Okay.
That's kind of funny. That I've been going to for like 15 years, and I've written a lot there, and so for whatever reason, it's a weird thing, but yeah, home or there. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, especially too if it's a certain kind of story. I don't know, maybe a kid's story wouldn't work there, but maybe it does. But if you're especially Chandler-esque or something where you want to really get in that mindset of sort of the that cigar culture.
Right. Yeah, I can't say there weren't any. There were no kids scripts written there. There might have been, but but yeah, it's something. I think it's like a focus thing.
Yeah,
it's just nice.
Whatever
it's
works.
Like some people, do this. You go to the coffee shop. I used to do that too all the time. But part of it is, the pressure of the deadline kind of determines how much freedom you have in your process. It's like you got to get it down. Yeah.
That's great. I love it.
Yeah.
Can you explain how you never start from a blank page, but how you copy and paste a premise and outline?
Yeah. So that's a tip from T.O.T.S, who was my partner on CoComelon Lane. So I think that was around the time when I was early on in T.O.T.S, when he was the head writer, and I was spending a lot of time on those first drafts, and the first draft of an outline or whatever, premise, and just taking my time. And what I learned from him was, for a script, he would take the outline, copy it into final draft, and start moving it around. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's the bad version. That's like the skeleton. And then the writing is rewriting. Then you start moving it around and you say, okay, this is working and this is a good line. Okay, this, and you just see it beginning, middle, and end. And so that was like, yeah, you take the premise, put it into the outline page and move it around. This is beat A, beat B. And you don't have enough for an outline, obviously, but you have the bad version. You have the skeleton. Then you go back in and rewrite it. And so that was the thing of like, because that blank page stops, you know, it's the cliche, like the blank page, kind of everyone freezes. And it's like, so if you could just put the bad version down, and it could be literally the previous assignment, take what works, because you've already done the work. So why wouldn't you do that? And then you rewrite, but like, take everything with you. So going back to square one on each stage actually doesn't make sense anymore. Unless you got so heavily noted that you need to go back to square one, but generally it's like there's things you can take. Why not? Yeah.
I believe you said get in the script and get out of your head. What does this mean?
Yeah, get in the script, get out of your head. Goes back to that, give yourself permission to write badly. And that means just get it on the page, and it doesn't matter what condition it's in. And that it doesn't make you any less of a professional if it's bad, because it always starts bad. And so I think, early on it was that voice of like, every line has to be perfect, because like, what if the boss happened to look over and he saw a line and he's like, I hired you to write the script, and like, that's your process? Like, again, that's just stuff in your head that you think of. That never happened. No one ever looked over my shoulder and judged one sentence as I was writing it, but we can allow ourselves to go there. And so the sooner you get out of your head and onto the page means you're not thinking anymore like abstractly, you're at least shaping something like clay. And how long are you gonna think about shaping clay versus doing it, right? Like the real work comes in like, touching the keys, or right? Like, so that is like a game changer, I think. It's just, but you have to give yourself permission to write badly. Yeah.
I'm reminiscing of the scene in Ghost.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
There's the kiln.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's just like that.
But and that goes back to what you said earlier of just like a professional keeps moving. And I love that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
How much of the story do you have to know before you can write the episode?
Well, in TV, by the time you write the episode, you've done the work of at least a premise, which is a 1.5 page summary, and an outline, which is like 4 pages of like beat A, beat C, and D, act 2, 4 beats, act 3, 4 beats. So you should know the general shape of it. A lot of people will say outline's like the hardest part because it's almost literalized, right? But it's not quite. And so if you do a good job at the outline, you can do a good job at the script. And I think that there's some truth in that. I think the script is the hardest part, and every script is hard. Even, it doesn't matter how long I've been doing this now, maybe 9 years or so, every script for TV is hard. But it's hard in like the engaging way, the way that makes it fun. And so if it's ever easy or too easy, it's like, it's probably not a great script and maybe not a great fit for me anymore. So it should feel hard, but in a way that you're like, ooh, okay, I want to crack this. And so, but you should be bringing enough to it to know where you want to go, which is the outline, the work that you did there.
Did you get bored in school a lot?
Yeah. Yeah, I would always, especially after like we touched on the Rocko's Modern Life and wanting to draw, I was always drawing in the margins of my textbooks, always. And so, yeah, school was, English was naturally a little bit better, math was tougher, and yeah, so it was definitely, I barely made it out, yeah.
Well, because you said that you want it to be hard in a good way, not in like, if it's too easy, and so that's what a lot of times people that, maybe it was too easy and they were sort of bored and...
No, I wasn't like the effortless A student. I was like the, a lot of effort C student. But I think that there's a myth that like, like for a professional writer that it should come easy or something like that. And I like to like remind people that like it's hard. Every script is hard. It doesn't mean but what changes is hopefully your confidence in the process. And meaning you're spending less time talking yourself out of doing something or having this inner dialogue of you're not good at, all that stuff. The confidence is like if I sit down and I write the bad version and I rewrite it, by Friday at 4, I'll have an email to the head writer or whoever with this done. So the discipline is there. It's not like it's super easy all of a sudden and you know how to tell every story. Every story has its own nuances and what makes it tough and also ways to like maximize the story concept. You know, whatever story you're trying to tell, is there, how far can you push it and do things you haven't done before and all that stuff. And so that's what you want to do every single script. And so it's not easy, but it should feel hard, is what I tell people. Yeah.
Can we hear more about your outlining process?
Yeah, so a typical like life of a TV episode starts at story break or starts even at the springboard stage where you send a paragraph of an idea to the network and they'll either say yes or no, and then it goes to story break. So that's like the writer's room where there's 4 or 5 of us and you put it up on the board, 3 acts with 4 beats in each one, and it comes to like rough life. And you know, it's the rough kind of map. And you get the benefit of like the group think and you pitch gags and stuff like that. And then it goes to one writer after that. And then you do the premise, which is like a 1.5-page summary. And so again, it's written in prose, it's not final draft, it's like Microsoft Word. And then that will go to the head writer to do their pass typically, and then the network. And then they come back with notes, and that's when you go to the outline. And so then the outline is now a more realized version of the premise, longer, you're getting a little more detail of what each beat feels like, and still should be tracking the story. You know, it's not, I'll have the premise, but I'll still have the story break grid open too, and I'll refer back to it for specificity and making sure, okay, this was the midpoint, so is this a midpoint in the outline? And just making sure that rough shape is still there, and unless you're like heavily noted, it should still be there. And then you're off to script after that.
And so that process that you just described before off to script, how many days or weeks or how long is that?
Typically, it could be average 4 days to do a premise and a 1.5 or 2 weeks to do an outline, which is pretty generous, like typically for this kind of thing, like that's enough time. But it's not uncommon, you have that time, it's not uncommon to be finishing a second draft of another episode, the one that you did before that one. And so you're juggling a couple things as a TV writer, and so that's why they give you that space. It doesn't take 2 full weeks to write an outline, but you might need to because you have to budget your time accordingly for the past work, and then, you know, it'll be your turn to break another story soon, so you're always juggling. Mm-hmm.
And so then the screenplay part, how long does that usually take?
That 2 weeks-ish for a kid's TV script, but it changes from show to show. It could be quick, it could be, and procrastination will kill you. You know, you could have 2 weeks, but maybe you do all the work in the last 3 days. Like that is the thing, you know, you have to budget your time. And so I like to work under a little bit of pressure, and so it's like typically not started the day that you're assigned it. I mean, you might be finishing other stuff, but it's like usually in that like last stretch is when it really kind of drilled down.
Yeah, some people just work better on a deadline, under pressure.
Yeah, and you use that deadline to as pressure to move forward. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What does that mean to think cinematically?
I think there's a kind of a myth that persists in writing for kids is that it's either easy or boring or whatever. And I like to think that you could think big when you're writing for kids television. That's really what it means. And so really try to maximize the promise or the concept of every episode. So if there's some opportunity or some promise of this action finale, like really push it and really see, like every show's a little bit different. And I like to say, like, creative restrictions are good. Like you should draw a box around every show that you're on, and because even if it's kids, it's like it could still be, they're not all the same. And so every show has its own world of what can happen, what you could do, what not. So you should draw a box around it and then try to push as much as you can against the edges. And that's where you'll really hit on something unique. And so and you could go over, and then that's when the network's like, that doesn't work, or that doesn't ring true, or you find it. But you have you finding the voice of the show and thinking cinematically just means pushing as much as you can to get the most out of a concept and make it feel like you're there's no reason that an action scene can't be really compelling and all that in a kid show. It's just I think you could feel like you're transported even in something that's made for kids. Yeah, so that's what I think. Thinking cinematically, it's like just like push. Yeah.
When you say push against the edges, so you're putting a box around it, knowing like, okay, it's for this age demographic here. But what if I go a little over where maybe the parents will like this?
Yeah.
But is that kind of what that is?
Yes, it can. So glad that you brought that up, because I was on a show and we were trying to get a joke in or something in, and the network pushed back. So we had a weekly meeting and I brought it up. And I said, what is the line? Because so many shows have winks to adults, right? And like that's, this is one thing, like what is the line? Because I see sometimes that's okay, sometimes it's not okay. And this executive gave a great answer, which was, in this particular case, this show is very complicated, already probably too complicated for kids. And so we need to keep the barrier to entry low. So if you're taking a complicated setting and you're trying to put in too many winks to adults, then you're going to start losing kids. So we need to do everything we can to try to keep them. And I thought that was a very good answer. So something like Bluey, which is so simple, and there's a lot, adults like it, there's a lot of winks to there's older jokes, right? Like there's some of that going on, but the setting is simple. You don't need to, it's a family at a house, that's it, right? And so then you can layer on some other stuff. But if you're going in complicated out of the gate, then you need to be wary of how much you're playing to the adults, because it's still for kids. So you need to keep that in mind. So that was how to deal with that.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah.
So remembering this is our general audience, we're hoping maybe we'll pull in a parent in the back. They'll be like, oh wait, I just heard that, that's funny,
Right.
But it's not necessarily for them, okay.
Right. And the idea of creative restrictions is all just how you frame the approach in your mind. So if someone's coming into this saying, it's kids TV, I can't do anything. Well, that's not gonna be a great script. So that's why I'm saying you have to find the boundaries by pushing. Don't box yourself in, because then you're not gonna do anything special. So try to push, and that's what's gonna make something that feels unique. And so that's why I'm like, embrace the restrictions and then try to find them. Don't just box yourself in and think you can't do anything. So it's a part of a mindset shift.
What is cinematic writing? Can you give us an example?
Ooh. First thing that came to mind was directing on the page, which I think is, you want to take the reader. And so something that I try to do is that even scripts shouldn't have to read like technical documents. Like you want them to have a rhythm and a flow, even if they're not meant to be read out loud like the dialogue is, but it's going to be read by the network, and then it's going to go get storyboarded. But I think to present a complete vision in each script, that's what it means. And then everything can change, or storyboard artists can find ways to plus it, and the actors could improvise, but you want to present a completed vision. And so that's what I think that means. Mm-hmm.
Have you always written cinematically?
No, try to find it. If you have to write for yourself and delight yourself. And you have to have fun. And so I think that is it. Like you have to do your best work when you're relaxed, and you can still be relaxed under pressure. I mean, that's kind of what you have to learn, is how do I relax while I'm doing this? Because it has to be fun. And so I remember early on, a head writer asked me, I think he could tell I was like stressed out about something, and he's like, yeah, but are you having fun? I said, oh yeah. He's like, good. And that's a reminder. And it's so, when you are relaxed and you're having fun and you write and to delight yourself first, because you're the first reader, then I think that there's something special to that then hopefully carries over on the page to the network or to the storyboard artist who gets it and is excited to do this scene. And things can change, they will change, but you want to hand something that's like really well thought out. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's a good little checking in. Yeah. How did you learn to write cinematically?
I think it goes back to write what delights you. Write what delights you and start there. and then and if you want to think big and say, oh, this sequence where they're pushing this whale up the hill reminds me of like Fitzcarraldo, or like Werner, Klaus Kinski is pushing the steamboat over the mountain, right? Like there's things that you could take and like, oh, this is that, and but ways to adapt it, not to like as a intentional wink or a nod, but just don't be afraid to think big and push it, and yeah.
Okay, so again, going back to what you said, you are the first reader.
You are the first reader. You have to do it for yourself first, because otherwise it's not really going to lift off the page, and that's what you want. That's what you want to strive for, I think.
Right, but just to play devil's advocate. So if you are the first reader, though, at times you're going to be very critical of yourself. It's human nature. We're all going to go, I don't know if I like this. This is no good. Mm-hmm. So then, how do you get out of that? How do you stay the audience eyes and ears, but then also take your own ego out of it, where you're either bashing it or praising it, and you maybe can't see it for what it is?
Yeah, I think I've never thought of like writing as playing God. Like some people think like, oh, I love it because I get to control all this stuff. I never thought of it like that. I follow the story. And just you want to feel challenged, but like follow the story and see how you could make the most of these moments that you write on the page, and try. There's a certain time where you're writing something and it clicks, and that's when you start to see it in your head, and write what you see in your head. Like that's it. It's like writing visually. Writing cinematically is like writing visually. But like after a while, you see it in your head, and you hear the actors' voices, hopefully. And so you need to follow that. It's not about like you're controlling the story or you can do whatever you want. It's like, no, you got to follow the story. And I think that's a key way to do it. Yeah.
And so the characters, they're in your head, and they're almost telling you what the story is.
Yeah, and you're seeing the scenes play out in your head, so you know if it's a good scene or not. You know if it works, and so that's what you want to get to. And so then you're out of it. You're not thinking, is this good or not? It's like you're seeing it in your head. And is this a moment that can sing or not? And then write it that way. So don't be afraid to direct on the page. Push in, do all those things that they tell you, or don't do it. Don't overdo it. But again, you want to present a complete vision. And so I think that's the way to do it. And then even if it all changes, that's fine. At least they don't feel like they have to save it. They feel like they're lifting it. And that's what you want. That's what you want. It's always going to change, but...
Well, and just in that moment, so you're almost talking about rule breaking, which is something you advocate for in some sense, because you have a handout too as part of your Story Series podcast,
yes,
which is about rule breaking.
Yes.
So we'll go into more of that later, but it sounds like that's something that you like to, that's part of that pushing out against the edge. Okay.
Yes, right. There's a freedom to that. And so you want to, if you want to call it channeling or these ideas or whatever, you want that relaxed kind of flow state that like an athlete feels, right? An athlete in a flow state, I doubt would say they're in control of the environment. That's not what it's about. It's not about being in control of the story, but you want that flow state while you're writing, and you got to get that bad version out first, and then you can get there, hopefully. Yeah.
What do you consider professional writing habits?
Professional writing habits, staying in motion, something we talked about, doing it. Just understanding the power of doing the thing and allowing yourself to be mediocre, bad, all that stuff. That is part of it. Knowing that you will make it better. Also following up, all that stuff that people don't always love to do. That sending emails, letting people know that you'd love to get coffee, all that stuff. That career building stuff is a big part of professional habits. And just because you'll naturally develop a network over time and friendships too. And so it's just maintaining those as best you can. And then I think acceptance, like we talked about, accepting the waiting, accepting the things outside of your control. I call that a habit because it's something you're going to have to remind yourself a lot of. And so I think that's important, those kind of top professional habits. And also taking things in. And that's also just a love of like movies, TV, books, the things that got you to fall in love with what you're doing in the first place. That could be easy to fall back on because you're working and all this stuff. And so just, especially if you ever need to like just replenish your soul, however you want to say it, is like go back to those things that fill you up. I think is a good like diet to have, a good creative diet.
Yeah, and I think something, going to the movies and hearing other people's reactions to work, and kind of getting out of your own head and hearing when other people gasp or they laugh or they're shaking their head and knowing like it, just seeing how other people are affected.
Yes, and you learn and you get surprised too. Like, oh, that got a reaction. I didn't expect that. Or yeah,
Right.
you learn things like that.
Are there any lessons that you've learned from the writers that you've interviewed on your Story Series podcast that you've incorporated into your own work?
Yeah, I would say something that came up again and again, and I turned it into this like compilation episode about pitching, which was character. How important character is in pitching, but in every series or film, it's all about the character. And so a common mistake writers, myself included, have made, you tend to focus a lot on world building, and when you're setting up a pitch, it's like this crazy, interesting world and all these like intricacies and details, and the characters fall flat, or they don't have a strong dynamic between each other, or if it's an older show, a way to grow an arc, things like that people often lead with how interesting a world is when they should be leading with the characters. So that's something that came up like across the board, from executives to feature film writers to TV creators. It was character, and it's like something that you kind of know already a little bit, but to hear it just verbalized over and over was really like, okay, I need to make sure I keep this at the front of mind every pitch or pilot script I write.
How do you approach creating characters now?
Yeah, I think the way I approach it now is, what does this character want and what's in their way, and how to use the world to illustrate that. So that's how you use the world, because obviously the world is not separate from the character. They live in this story's world, but how is the world seen or in relation to this character that we're going to follow? And those two things need to be in sync or in contrast or whatever it is, but learning that, and how do you tell who a character is based on the world and things like that. So it's not just world building for world's sake, it's like, how does that inform the character? So there was just a random thing I did. I was putting this Bible together, and they wanted a bunch of locations around this city, and at first I was kind of stuck because it was like, well, how do you pick what location? Like, kind of struggling through it, and then I realized, what if I described those locations in relation to the character? This is where the character likes to go and hang out and do this, and this is where he likes to go to, look at the view, or like, how can those locations tell us who the main character is? And then we're learning more about the character through these locations. Suddenly those locations had emotion to it, because now it's like, oh, that's what this character does. And so things like that, I think are really, really helpful.
What's your favorite fictional character? What's a character that you almost feel you could vicariously live through?
Oh, gosh.
Doesn't have to be animation.
Vicariously live through. Bill Murray, Lost in Translation.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Or Ethan Hawke, Before Sunrise.
Okay.
That genre. Yeah. I think that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because there's for different reasons, but Ethan Hawke the Before trilogy is just incredible, and it's so simple and so powerful. It's like that just simple. And same with Lost in Translation. Like, those are so simple, but they have a spirit and an energy to them. The music, the characters want different points in their life if you put them together. But there's just a magic to wandering, I think, because when you wander, allow yourself to wander, you find things. And so it's, those come to mind. Those are big influences on me just personally. Yeah.
Right, interesting. I think of also too William Hurt. Any character he played, there was a lot of sort of like what was not said. It's very similar to that. Kind of reminds me of with Lost in Translation, or
and also Paris, Texas. Talk about what's not said. Who Harry Dean Stanton.
Yeah.
Who doesn't speak a lot in that movie, and so just talk about the power of what's not said. And I would put Paris, Texas in that category of like Lost Translation, the Before trilogy. That is really, there's some magic there. Yeah.
Yeah, show don't tell type of Which must be interesting because with animation, there's a lot of talking, isn't there, with the characters?
There is a lot of talking, but you have to keep it moving. And so you have to find ways to keep it in motion. And so it's physical gags, it's these mini challenges of, okay, you need to get this exposition out. What's going on? What are they doing? How can we put them in motion? All that stuff. And so those are the fun challenges. But there is a lot of talking, but you have to keep it moving because otherwise kids are out.
And for the one that there's more winks to the adults, let's say like Paranorman is maybe one of my favorite ones, or Coraline or whatever, which is probably more, it's meant for more adults or teenagers, not young children. But just that type of character, you're keeping them going. There is this world, but still, again, we're coming back to the characters, what's driving it.
Yeah. How you have to see the world through the character's eyes, not just describe the world. As an outsider or as the writer creating it, what does the world look like through the character's eyes? And that will, I think, create a harmony that makes your pitch or your script or story memorable. Yeah.
Are you always learning and experimenting with your writing process and your craft for story?
Yeah, I love that question because sometimes I wonder, like at the start of every script, it's like, yes, you bring in the outline, you find it, but like, what would it look like if I threw everything I knew out? Like, there's something about a beginner's mindset, and keeping a beginner's mindset that's really important. And so, because just the way that you do something is not the best way, even if it's been working for you. And so, there should be some self-examination in your process of just what can you do without, what can you change, that I think is ever evolving, which is part of the fun. Of just the craft itself. And so it's like, what can you throw out? What can you do better? What would it look like if you didn't know anything about, right? Like if you didn't have any of your go-tos that you do. It's fun ways to think about it. And so that's something I try to do at every script is like, just remember to approach it like a beginner.
And is that also too because with a beginner, maybe there's no expectations and we're not thinking about, oh, well, this got me this job or whatever, or this accolade. You're kind of just doing it for the joy of doing it?
Yeah, and probably an innocence to it, a lack of outside voices, expectations that are ever present. Yeah, I think there's, not to go off on this tangent, but real quick, like I used to teach martial arts a long time ago, and the headmaster of the studio told this story that I still stays with me, where he was like a 10th degree black belt at this time, but when he was starting out, he was at some tournament, and there was a rumor that this like grandmaster was going to be practicing at night, and so they wanted to get a glimpse of what this guy did. And so the headmaster of my studio and a couple other fellow up and comers, because they weren't really established yet, went to go watch him in secret and to see what is he, flying kicks, like all this stuff. What is he going to do? And he was doing the moves that white belts were doing. He was doing the basic punches, the basic kicks, and the other students left because they're like, that's boring. But the headmaster of my studio, he stayed to watch because he understood that you're nothing without the foundation, without the beginner's mindset. So there's something there to take into writing or anything that you want to get better at. Is it's so easy to skip the beginning. Like, I know how to do this, and that's a trap. If you say that enough times, it's a trap. And so that's where that self-examination comes in of like, what would it look like if I didn't have any of my bad habits that, just little quirks. And it's good just to think of those things. And so the beginner's mindset, it's like, don't forget that stuff. Don't forget that stuff. Yeah.
I love that story.
Yeah, right?
That's really great. And you took me there. I don't even know.
Yeah.
I'm seeing like a moonlight and they're just like, I don't know where this was, but I felt it.
Yeah. And it's like, why is he doing the most basic moves? And it's like, because those are the most important. What else would he be doing, right? So there's something interesting to think about that you could kind of take. Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
And then you have this, what you call the Rule Breaker's Guide to Finding Your Creative Voice. What is a rule breaker when it comes to creativity?
I think it's baked into creativity. And I think that the rules that you choose to follow and the rules that you choose to break are what makes you you. And so, especially writing, finding your voice, it's not perfect. You're never going to write the perfect script. You always aspire to that, right? But it's never going to get there. And at the same time, you're always hearing advice on do this, all that stuff. And you definitely shouldn't follow every rule. Definitely shouldn't break every rule, of course. But it's making those decisions which are highly personal. And so it goes back to like the flaws or those imperfections that you kind of come out of you or what makes you you. And so I think it's, abandoning the idea of perfection, but chasing it, but realizing you'll never get there. And so, I think that that's a big one. Yeah.
But what if, are there two kinds of writers? There's like the perfect student that's in the front row that raises their hand all the time, and then there's the sort of the Hunter S. Thompson or the Bukowski or whatever that's in the back and dismissing it as more of a nihilist.
Right.
Is either one better or worse?
No, it's authenticity. That's what it's all about. Just being authentic to you and just acting on what you believe. And so, because it's much better to fail on your own terms than by following advice that you didn't believe in. And so that's a big thing, is just do it on your terms. Follow this, I'm gonna break this, I'm gonna evolve and keep changing. Those are the kinds of questions I think are good to ask yourself. And so that's why I have fun with that like rule breaker kind of angle, which is like it's baked into creativity already. It's kind of a crazy craft to get paid to do. It's kind of insane. And it's also like, how do you even talk about this thing? How do you nail it down? It's like ever evolving. And so it's like, no, part of it is like, things that you choose to follow, things that you choose to break, and on you go.
So then, if the type A perfect student, don't try to become Hunter S. Thompson. Stay in your lane as who you are and write from that place.
I would say stay who you are. Don't have to stay in your lane. I think that, so be who you are. I've known plenty of people. There's a fear of getting pigeonholed, and that's another thing I say is like, just don't worry about getting pigeonholed. Worry about getting paid. Like seriously, like just get pigeonholed and then figure out your way out of it. There's a hesitancy up-and-comers have about like, well, am I going to stay stuck here if I do this? And it's like, you got to get in it. You got to get in the middle of it. Don't try to control so much from the outside before you've even gotten your first job. Like if you know you hate something, don't do it. But remember, like you don't always know what you like until you're exposed to it. So you could change lane, you could do this, but just be true to yourself, and it doesn't, you're going to do things that feel like work and jobs and tough and all that, but like you'll know if you're in the right spot or not. Mm-hmm.
We received this comment in one of our videos. Modern writers think rules are for breaking. Instead of adjusting themselves to create within the rules, they think that they are better than those rules. The results are weak because those assumptions are wrong?
Yeah, okay, I like that. I would say, especially with starting out, follow the rules when you're starting out. Because there is, if you don't know what to do and you're kind of flailing, like just follow the rules. Do what you're expected, do what you're supposed to do. And then there's going to be some wisdom that comes and you're going to say, I don't have to do that part. Actually, that part doesn't work for me. And you can start taking things out. So I would say, don't think you're not above anything. You're not. Like, follow the rules. There's a reason that Grandmaster was doing white belt moves. Like, right, he didn't break the rule of like, I don't need to learn this. I could go straight to this. Like, keep the foundation, know the hero's journey, all that stuff, learn it. And then you decide for yourself what to break. And so, but you can't skip that stuff. You need a foundation. And so it's still got to work. Like if anyone, you can hire a non-actor, right? If you're casting a film, but because the non-actor feels authentic, not because you're breaking a rule of, I want bad acting, right? Like you're not breaking that rule. You want something that feels true. So you should do those things that feel true to you and in writing.
What does it mean to actually book your next writing job? What type of work are you putting in?
Booking your next writing job is when you sign a contract, not when you're promised anything. So that is the thing that any agent or rep will tell you. It's like, don't celebrate too soon. So I think it's planting those seeds early as you know you're wrapping up, and hoping to some degree the stars align, and you cast your net out there and you try for it. goes back to that networking, those emails, and putting the word out there. Hopefully you have a representation that can help connect some dots for you too. And then it's a timing thing.
Okay. And also you said too, just being at peace with the fact that this is kind of the ebb and flow of this industry. This is what we've signed up for, as stressful as it is.
Yeah, but yeah, it goes back to not taking it personally. Like that's the thing to separate, because it's easy to do that. But if there's acceptance and this is how it is for everybody and this is normal, then you're less likely to take it personally. And so that's just healthier. Yeah.
But as creative people, though, let me just push back on that. We often do take in more, we feel more, and we do take everything personally. We do think everything's about us. But
yes.
How do we get at that? That's an existential question. That's not about.
Right. That's a great point. So I was lucky to have, like, when I was on an early show, I would get a lot of notes on this particular script from the network, and I thought the script was great, and the notes there's a ton of notes, and you're never supposed to look on your phone because it always looks like there's more, because it's smaller. But I was scrolling through and I was like, oh my God, it was like my night was like kind of ruined. And then I saw how the head writer and the show creator reacted, which were, oh, so it's really just this. They boiled down the notes into this, they didn't freak out. And so I think you have to take your cues from the people that are more experienced than you, and hopefully they're good models, but of just staying at a reasonable state of mind. And so, yeah, you can easily take it personally, do that, but just take your cues from the people that have been doing it longer than you, and just that's a way to help yourself, I think.
I see. So it's kind of all right. Yeah, you're just kind of like course correcting in a mellow way, not. You're not. It's not Albert Finney and Network.
Right. Yeah, hopefully that's a little too far. But I think, and also you need to remind yourself you're not alone. And that's reach out to people. And that's just part of the network. Is not always for getting me a job. It's just people that are doing it, that are having the same problems as you, or that did have the same problems or whatever. That is important too. And so yeah. If you get in, you can make it about yourself for sure. And you just need to bring someone else into it, and then you can have that shared experience.
What film do it just burns inside you that you didn't make it? I always want to know that.
I think Lost in Translation is a big one. I wanted to crawl inside that movie. I watched it at a time when I was working overnight shift at a hotel, La Quinta Hotel, not far from here, and I was like the night auditor, so I would just work the front desk and check in people, who would come in every now and then, but really you just have to stay up. And so they let you do homework or watch movies or whatever, and I was just dreaming of a screenwriting career, writing scripts and learning and seeing that movie. There was, it probably wasn't an accident that years later I ended up going overseas to study, of just someone, just the mood, the tone, watching it 3 a.m, with my hotel name tag on, and wondering am I ever going to get out in the world and see things, and am I going to have a problem, existential, romanticizing the movie to a degree, and wanting to crawl inside of it, and the music and the tone, it's all of it together. It's a poem, and there's a lot unsaid in the movie. Speaking of what you don't say, and the script is really short, right? Because Sofia Coppola also directed it, so she could do that. But it's just the art of simplifying, leaving out, and just putting it out there for people to take and make their own.
See, I want to see your story. I actually want to see that because I'm sure you've dealt with some interesting scenarios on your different shifts.
Yeah.
And that whole overnight world, and anybody who's ever worked late nights or graveyard, the world, especially here in LA, is it's scary, terrifying, fascinating.
Yes.
But yeah, I want to see your story.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. I would go to Borders during the day, get a couple movies, and then go to my shift at night and watch those movies. That's how I discovered Before Sunrise too. And that was a big, just leaving and having an adventure. That was an important part. I think too, just of a young person who's still living at home and dreaming and working part-time. And it's just I want to leave the world, and how do I do that? And so, yeah, those are biggies for me.
And you did. You went
Yeah.
overseas.
Yeah.
And you didn't know Mandarin
No.
when you flew.
No, that was a total, like, the story there real quick is like, I was at CSUN and I was majoring in screenwriting, and I thought if I mastered in humanities, it would make me a broader person, and then I'd be a better writer. And so, because I knew I didn't want to take more screenwriting, I was like, I need something else to make my writing better. And I thought I needed life, So I was like, humanities. And one random afternoon, Chinese film professor sends the class scholarship opportunity in China. And I thought, this is like the humanities, but in real life. And it was one of those life moments. I'd never thought about China before, didn't know anything about it other than the Great Wall, and I didn't even know what that meant. And I was like, I'm going. And so I applied and then graduated, and then that September I was on a plane over there. And so in some ways I did have that experience, and going to community college too, it was like, that's not leaving home. I'm still going home, and then, so I really wanted to get out, and then knowing I wanted to eventually work in Hollywood, it's like, am I ever gonna get out of this little bubble, right? And just like have an adventure somewhere in life, and so that's part of it, yeah.
Wow. I love it. I love it. That's great. But you did learn Mandarin eventually?
Studied, during the day it was like Mandarin, reading, writing, comprehension, and then afternoons were ours, and we'd just do film stuff with students and get asked to act in plays because you're a tall white guy.
Yeah.
And there are plays and short films or whatever students doing around campus, and just like live a life, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.